There is a type of person who, when their car breaks down on the side of the road, does not call anyone. They open the hood, stand there whether it's hot or cold, and examine the engine, and something in their face changes. Without panic, without anger, something quiet, something that almost looks like relief. This moment is worth examining because the real issue is not the car. And it never was. When a person starts working on a machine as complex and yet as orderly as an automobile, certain things in the architecture of their thinking begin to change. This does not happen in a classroom. It rarely comes from a book. It happens under a vehicle, with grease on their arms, while dealing with a problem that needs to be solved. In that environment, the brain experiences something very specific. It builds a kind of confidence that cannot be imitated and cannot be borrowed from someone else. Most people go through life seeking solutions to their problems from external sources. When something breaks, they look for someone to fix it. When something goes wrong, they find someone to explain it. This is not a bad thing. But people who work on cars made a different choice at some point, consciously or not. They decided that the machine is understandable and that if they stay with it long enough, it will reveal itself. This decision, which seems to be about carburetors and timing belts, is actually a decision about the nature of reality. This is where psychology begins. The human brain responds to mechanical problem solving in a way unlike almost any other cognitive task. When a person diagnoses an engine fault, they do more than just gather information. They construct a mental model of an invisible system. They hold multiple variables in working memory at the same time: sound, smell, behavior, history, and compare them against a body of knowledge formed through physical experience. Neuroscientists call this embodied cognition. The hands and the brain function as a single unit. Knowledge is not stored in language. It is stored in muscle, in pattern recognition, and in that particular silence that comes after a properly tightened bolt stops turning. People who have this skill do not always talk about it. If you ask them how they knew the alternator was about to fail, they pause. They might say, "Something felt off." They are not being vague. They are telling the truth. The knowledge lives somewhere beneath words. This creates a personality trait that looks like stubbornness from the outside. People who work on cars tend to trust their own perception more than external factors. They have experienced situations where experts were wrong, where the manual did not account for the specific wear pattern of that vehicle, where what their hands told them was not confirmed by any device. Over time, this creates a bias toward direct experience. They become skeptical of people who speak with great confidence about things they have never touched. This is not arrogance. It is a way of understanding shaped only within problems that yielded to patience and first-hand attention. There is also something in the relationship between mechanical work and time. Repairing an engine cannot be accelerated the way modern tasks can. There are sequences that must be followed. Torque specifications exist for physical reasons, not bureaucratic ones. If you take shortcuts, the problem comes back, usually worse. This teaches a lesson that is rapidly becoming rare today. Some things have their own timing, and that timing is not negotiable. People who internalize this carry it into their relationships, their work, their thinking. They become more tolerant of slow processes and unusually skeptical of anything that promises a quick fix. Now consider the emotional dimension. Many people who work on cars learned it in the presence of someone else. a parent in a garage on a weekend afternoon, an uncle who handed over a wrench without saying much, a relative who showed instead of explaining. These were not formal lessons. There was usually no curriculum. What was being passed on was not just technical knowledge, it was a relationship built with difficulty, a stance that did not involve walking away from a problem. The car was only the medium. The real content was something harder to describe. This is why car knowledge often becomes identity. When a skill is acquired within a relationship, it carries more emotional weight than something learned from a tutorial video. The wrench has meaning. The make and model of the first car worked on is remembered with almost biographical clarity, not because of the car, but because of what was happening in that garage, next to that person, during that time in life when the world was still being figured out. People often misread those who have this skill. They see confidence and assume it is about cars. They see self-sufficiency and think it is about not wanting help. They see quiet mastery and mistake it for indifference. But underneath, something else is usually operating. People who learned at a young age that problems yield to patience, that machines respond to careful attention, that mastery is available to anyone willing to stay with difficulty long enough. This is what psychologists call an internal locus of control. The belief that outcomes are primarily determined by one's own effort and understanding, not by luck or other people's decisions. With this belief, everything changes. A person's approach to work changes. Their response to setbacks changes. Their tolerance for ambiguity and their threshold for asking for help change. The point is not that they don't need others. The point is a deeply ingrained belief that they can solve a problem. This belief was not given to them. It was built step by step in the process of a machine that did not work, and then, after enough effort, did. There is one more layer. Working on a car is one of the last areas where a person can be completely verifiably right. In modern times, success is often ambiguous. How did the meeting go? Hard to say. Is the project good? It depends on who you ask. But an engine that was not running and then starts running again is not open to interpretation. The feedback is clear. For people who spend most of their lives dealing with subjective evaluations and uncertain outcomes, the garage becomes almost a radical place, a space where reality gives definitive answers. This is why mechanical work often functions as psychological regulation. When the rest of life feels out of control, when institutions fail, when relationships become complicated, when the future is uncertain, the engine offers a bounded and solvable problem. When someone who had a difficult day retreats to the garage, they are not escaping their life. They are rebuilding something. They are reconstructing on a small scale the sense of competence and clarity that the rest of the week may have worn down. What looks like a hobby is actually a coping strategy. What looks like a mechanical skill is actually a psychological one. And the person who appears to know about cars is actually someone who has learned in the most physical and irreversible way possible that the world yields to patient attention. The real question worth considering is not whether you can fix an engine. The real question is this: what broken thing in your own life are you standing in front of with the hood open? While waiting for someone to come and tell you what to do, what is that thing whose answer has always required your own hands?